Hello, this is Miss Andrea with CheesePress Publishing. Some time ago, I wrote this book, Lines of Legacy, African American History Through Literature. And basically, it walks you through different periods of African American history timeline, beginning with pre-colonialism through modern day. And each section gives you a sampling of books that you should read and essay prompt questions to help you study the book. And so the idea is, if you read a sampling, you don't have to read all the books in here because we're in the 80s. But if you read a good sampling of these books in order, almost regardless of which books you choose, you're going to have a really good idea of African American history. And so the next thing I'm about to do is I'm creating an out-school course. And what I've decided is we're going to do a book club. And I'm going to pick one book at a time from this book, and we're going to discuss it. And the first book that we're going to do is going to be a little out of order, but it's just because this book lives within me so well. This book is The Color Purple. We mentioned the book The Color Purple here on pages 84 and 85. And it gives you published, setting date, where it's set. You get a decent synopsis of it. It tells you what the reading level is, so this is going to help you. Because understand, I write mostly for homeschoolers, but these books on African American history tend to be rated older because it's difficult information. But you have the reading level and you have the maturity level in here, so that should help you make a decision on what to work with your students with or what to just do on your own. And then there's a series of essay prompts on the second page to give you some discussion points to work through. Cool. Interestingly enough, and the reason why I want to do a book by book club throughout school is because there's just so much more. I was just writing a quick outline and I got 7 pages. And so let's talk about The Color Purple. I read it in 1985 in time for the movie, which came out in spring of 86, right before I graduated. And I had a habit of reading the book and then watching the movie. I highly recommend that process. And then over the years, I've seen play adaptations of it. At this point, they've revised the play a few times. And now there's a musical movie out in addition to all of that. And so what I want to refer strictly back to is the book, although I do want to look at how they've changed the story over time. I'm just going to start at the beginning and give a brief overview, and hopefully Mary will talk back at me a little bit of things that pop out in The Color Purple and things that we would discuss over a 4-week period with class in The Color Purple. And so the first thing we would want to do is have kids reading it and get them paced through it so that they're finishing the book before we get to the end. I don't want them still finishing the book as we finish discussing it. But overall impressions of The Color Purple and what emotions or thoughts it evokes. I think it was the first book that made me cry. It's definitely a tearjerker. It makes me sad just because of how it starts out. Like, this young girl, Celia, is clearly being abused. She's being abused to the point where children are produced and given away. And then when Mr., a neighborhood farmer, comes to Celia's father and wants to marry Celia because his wife has died and he's got all these children, right? He goes, well, you can't have that one. She's too young, but you can have this one because she's spoiled. And so she can't make any more children, so you can do whatever you want with her. So go ahead and take her. And the first thing he does is he brings her home and shoves her in the house. And the house is a whole mess. And she just gets a bucket of water and she starts washing walls. The house is a disaster. And the next scene you see, besides the wedding night, is her now getting to the task of combing his daughter's hair. And the daughter was making too much noise, and she said something about she might have to cut it, and he punched her in the face. So there's a whole lot of this is a bad situation. This young lady is in a bad situation. And at that point, thank goodness, they flash forward and they're getting along. They have a cordial relationship. And then he brings home a sick woman and tells her, you have to take care of this woman. And the first thing the woman does is look at her and say, you show is ugly, and laughs. And so that's how The Color Purple starts out. It feels awful, but you get the sense that this is just the beginning of something, and something's about to happen. If you look at the structure, the format of the way the book is written, it's called, I'm pretty sure it's epistolary. So they do it that way for the intimacy. You're in someone's conversation, right? And so at first her conversation is between her and God. And then over time, she shifts the conversations from God to her sister, who she starts writing to her sister, who's missing because her sister runs away from Dad and runs to her. And I think Mr. put up with it for a whole half second. And then he realizes that this young girl is teaching this woman how to read. And that's not the best use of his time for her, or her time for him. And he throws her out. I think he makes a pass at her, and that doesn't go, and he throws her out. And so now her sister's gone. And we find out what happened to her sister much later in the book, which is where the book comes around and things start getting positive. And so anyone who's gotten a third of the way through the book may not want to pick it back up. But you start to see transformations in Celie's relationship with Shug, the woman who he brings home. And she nurses this woman back to health, and this woman becomes very appreciative and very protective of her, even though she's Celie's husband's girlfriend, right? And then you see the relationship with the kids who Celie's helped raise. The boy's name is, I forgot, Harpo. He takes a wife, Sophia, and it seems fine, and it seems cute, and it seems lovely. And then he shows up and asks Celie for advice on how to get his wife, Sophia, to mind him. And she says 2 words, beat her. Right? So fast forward. So, you told Harpo to beat me. Sophia screams in the field. All my life I had to fight. I had to fight my daddy. I had to fight my brothers. I had to fight my cousins and my uncles. A girl ain't safe in a family of men. But I never thought I'd have to fight in my own home. I loves Harpo. God knows I do. But I'll kill him dead before I let him beat me. They didn't stay together long. And so I'm going to stop there as far as how, because I don't want to tell the whole story at this moment.
Coming back to this answer of I've had to fight my whole life, that is commentary on the relationship between men and women, boys and girls. And this isn't new. This isn't an exception in this relationship because I've been living with that over here. And so that normalizes that interaction. And so talking about how these things are the commentary going through, because we kind of set up from early on that violence against women is standard practice.
If you look at it from a societal point of view, and because Oprah's in my head, because Oprah plays Sophia,
sure.
If you think about her own experience, and so many Black women that I know, there's always this experience of it's Thanksgiving, families coming on, wear this and stay away from this family member. You can't wear your shorts and t-shirt even though you're in your own house. Not those jeans, not that shirt. Here, dress like an Amish. And stay away from this family member. And that's what that's talking about. That's specifically what she's talking about. And
exactly.
In the 80s, that was real common. Now, young women don't know large chunks of their family in the Black community. I don't know Uncle Bob. You can talk to him when you're grown. Because the generation who were treated that way said, well, we're just not going to do this.
Right. They changed it. They said that we're going to break this cycle.
No, that cycle's been.
It exists in the...
Still happens some.
Sure.
But people, I don't know if this generation can identify with that part of that book the way my generation can identify with that part.
And so then that's when it becomes a history text. understand and looking at the various ways that these themes, these elements that are recurring throughout the book, what that says about the environment and the time frame that's represented.
Yeah, it's absolutely very endemic.
Because it's actually set.
The treatment of women up and through the 1900s.
Right.
All the way through.
So it was written in the 80s, but it's set in when it follows basically the timeline of Alice Walker's
1910,
growing up, right?
1920.
So it's set further back.
Oh, yeah. Spoiler, later on, when she gets control of her father's store, finds out that it is her father's store and that man was never her father, that was her mother's second husband. She starts doing things like making pants for women and things like that. So that's how I know when it's set, because I'm going, what were they wearing?
Right. I guess what was in my head is I thought that it was specifically talking about the author's childhood. So I thought that the author was born around the turn of that
She
century.
may have been getting stories from her family.
Probably.
Because it's close enough for that to have been the case.
Well, it's also one of her later works, because as I was just doing the Googling.
It's her first popular work.
It's her most well-known work.
And so we'll talk about in here how the women change, how does Celie change, how does Shug change, how does Sophia change, and then we forget about Nettie. Nettie goes through some evolution too, but we only see a little bit about her beginning and her end. Nettie ends up back in Africa with Celie's children, who were adopted by missionaries in Africa. So Nettie ended up working for a missionary family who's the person who the dad had given Celie's children to. And they all ended up in Africa, and then they ended up stuck in Africa. And so all the letters that she was writing to her sister, Mr. was hiding the letters and never sending them. And then Mr. finally had to come to Jesus because Celie had changed to a point where she stood up to him and left. And then he made it his business to get that family out. So that's the tears. That's why I remember why you start crying, because he changes.
Right.
He softens. And that's really cool.
And so then on that standpoint in teaching the novel, one of the key things is the evolution of these characters and growth, and which is a key, that's a standard thing that if it's something worth reading.
Even in their greatest villain, people don't wake up wanting to be villains. They wake up in the situation they're in. And as they grow in age and as they see themselves, if someone's bold enough to show them themselves, they're going to start changing things. And when he realized how much he depended on Celie and Shug, and they were like, the mirror they held up to his face was crazy, right? So the language in the book, I've read a lot of books that are written in, I would say Ebonics, or not even Ebonics. They're written in the grammar that was common of the time. This was the first one I read that was just written in straight up broken English. And I learned pretty quickly in that moment that the only way to understand what was going on was to read it out loud. So I had to read the entire book out loud because I'm an auditory learner. And I had to hear myself say the words. And I think it'd be interesting to challenge teens.
Or at least track with an audiobook.
Absolutely. First thing Shug says to Celie, you show is ugly. But interesting, later she speaks in full sentences. Just like I think it pisses God off when you walk by the color purple. And I think it doesn't see and don't appreciate its beauty. She says later to her, get your eyeball. You got to get man off your eyeball, girl. What? And she's telling him, don't worry about what men think of you. Don't, things like that. And then Celie, when she's telling Mr. off, you a low down dog is what's wrong. I say, it's time to leave you and enter into the creation. She also tells him, she also gives him a little hexy finger and says, everything that you've done to me is going to come back on you. But the language is broken and you have to, that's an odd word for me to use. The language is broken. It's not broken. It's not basic. It's real. It's an indicative of the time and the place. They're getting their point across. And so we go deeper into comments like that and affirmations like that and what they mean and what they're saying to each other there. So there's a whole lot of female empowerment and solidarity in this because these women weren't supposed to like each other. None of them.
Right.
Except for Celie and her sister. Celie was not supposed to love Shug
Well, of course not. It's a mistress.
at
Her
all.
husband.
Sophia wasn't supposed to love Celie. And that's crazy because we go from, you told Harpo to beat me, to, and when I see you, Miss Celie, I know there's a God after all. Right? Because she came to her in jail. They didn't get doctors. They came to her. Her eye was shut. Her head was cracked. Her nose was split. And Celie mended her before they jailed her. These people aren't supposed to like each other. But even in the worst circumstances, women will take care of women still. So we talk about that. We talk about abuse and resilience. And how, I don't know, Celie's, I guess, long suffering through the abuse and her ability to put it into words, into letters, helps her process and things like that. We also see this resilience in Sophia, who goes through hell and back. So let's talk about that. So racism and the patriarchy, right? The novel explores how racism and patriarchy intersect to oppress Black women in particular. Celie and Sophia both suffer under abuse of Black men. But those men, Mr., and that's his name, we don't know his last name, Mr., and Harpo lash out the women in their lives as a way of reclaiming control. Because we are living in the Jim Crow South. These men are limited in what they can do with their lives. And therefore they are frustrated. Harpo had the good sense to open a juke joint. Good sense or bad sense? At least he had some fun, right? Sophia's storyline most directly addresses racism because she is beaten in prison for simply refusing to be subservient to a white woman. So we don't see any real evidence of Jim Crow at first, right? With the exception of that it's clear that Blacks and whites just don't mix in this world.
Well, the first part of the book, all of the characters are Black.
Right. So
you're seeing
we're living in this
inside
Black
the
microcosm.
community, yes.
Right. And we're something's not right, but no one's being real clear about it. It's just that these Black people living in their Black world and living their best Black lives that suck. So the Black men are farming, and the Black men are mostly farming, and the Black women are mostly domestic, either in their homes or in someone else's homes. We don't see that either until we do. I'm gonna go back up to that. So we talked about the Harpo, you beat me. So Sophia Buster, who is Sophia's new man, because she told Harpo to kick bricks. And Sophia's children were walking around downtown being fabulous. When they ran into the mayor and his wife, who are not Black, they are white. And the mayor's wife compliments Sophia on her children's pretty faces, grabbing their faces, inspecting their teeth. Oh, as you do. And commenting on their white teeth, and looks at Sophia and says, would you like to be a maid in my household? Because she had done such a good job raising her own children. And the mayor's wife thought she was doing her thing. She thought she was being perfectly amazing and saying, oh my gosh, your children are so cute. Look at their teeth, look at their skin. They smell good, whatever. Come clean my house like you clean your children. And Sophia didn't have no sense. Right? So she said, hell no, very clearly and very plainly. And the mayor asked her to repeat herself. And she said, hell no. And he slapped her. Movie. Family's over there. A couple of kids near Sophia. Sophia's there. The mayor and his wife are standing there. And she says, hell no. And you hear the tumbleweeds and the music, right? And he slaps her. And Buster yells, no, Sophia, no. Because you see her fist ball up. She co-cocks him. So, and that's pretty much how it's explained in the book too. But it's illustrated really nicely in the movie. And then a bunch of police rush in and beat her until they cut away. They just beat her and keep beating her. So what happens is they beat her really bad. Celie comes and cleans her up the best she can, but she said she looked like an eggplant. Her face was unrecognizable, and she was disfigured permanently. She is sentenced to 12 years in jail. So Sophia is sentenced to 12 years in jail for striking the mayor and sassing the mayor's wife. While in jail, Sophia is put to work in the laundry. She spends 15 hours every day washing clothes and sheets. She does this for 11 and a half years and tries her best to be a model prisoner. Harpo suggests perhaps she might get off early for good behavior. But Sophia tells him, because they're friends. I don't know how these people got along this whole movie. It was crazy. Or the whole book. It was crazy. She tells him good behavior ain't good enough for them, meaning the prison officers. Being in jail for nearly 12 years, of course, takes a toll on Sophia. And in the end, the mayor and his wife get her out early to come work for her. So they broke her and then made her work in that house. Now, historical context, 1947, Georgia. Rosalie Ingram, a Black sharecropper and mother of 12, and her 2 sons were sentenced to death for defending themselves during an altercation with a white man who tried to force her to work in his fields and allegedly made sexual advances. She said no, a fight broke out, and the man was killed. Despite clear evidence of self-defense, she was convicted by an all-white jury in one day. After a national outcry, her sentence was commuted to life, and she was eventually released after 12 years. And this very closely mirrored, there's several of these stories, but this one was the one that most closely mirrored Sophia's fictional narrative, a woman punished not for a crime, but for resisting white control and exploitation, for saying no. And it reflects the danger of talking back. Her experience is a stand-in for many real women who were brutalized for asserting dignity. And if you think about things that were going on in the Black Lives Matter movement, the woman who was arrested and killed because the police officer decided that she had an attitude. To this day, to be a Black woman and to be angry is a crime whether you have a right to be angry or not. And people are going to assume you're angry regardless. And it's a little scary because I experience now someone's like, oh, I don't like that person, they don't seem friendly. That person's just over there living in their face. But her experience was a stand-in for many real women who were, I already said that, brutalized, asserting dignity. Oh, I stopped there. There's a school to prison pipeline issue that still persists in this idea of Black indignance. From a very young age, Black kids are kind of taught to keep your mouth shut or be punished. Of a paper published through University of Berkeley, they wrote, relative to white students, Black students were 3.6 times more likely to have been suspended out of school, 2.5 times more likely to have suspended in school, 3.4 times more likely to have been expelled, 2.4 times more likely to have been referred to law enforcement, 2.9 times more likely to have experienced a school-based arrest, 2.3 times more likely to have been corporally punished. And this is what we call the school to prison pipeline because qualified, punished, eventually suspended. Now they have no skills.
Well, and they're arrested and they're brought up on criminal charges.
Right.
I don't have the study in front of me, but this is pretty well documented. They've looked at an aggregate of cases that come before a judge and taken each judge and found comparison points in case studies. This young man, whatever age, this is the charge, these are the circumstances, the kid is white, gets off with probation. Exact age, exact charge, in circumstances, Black kid goes to jail.
Well, I know of a case. I know a young man 2 years older than my kids. Lived in a very popular country club in near the mall. And all of them were in possession of marijuana. The 3 white kids' records got cleared and they went to college. The Black kid got a record and couldn't get into college.
Yeah.
Spent the next 10 years working at Batteries Plus. Like,
it's been studied and documented over and over and over
and it was a group of 4 of them.
Yeah.
It was the only one punished.
Same charge, same circumstances, same age, same first time offense for everybody. White kids get off, Black kids go to jail.
Yeah. So, it doesn't talk about this per se, but you have to look at where we are now based on where we've been. This book more or less talks about the struggle of Black women, but Black women were so marginalized by the world and by their men because their men were frustrated because of what they were also going through. Yeah.
And I think the connection between the book and modern society and these ideas is you have underlying expectations and thought processes and ideas that exist in a culture, and they don't spring out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So this is a snapshot during this time period of how that same underlying idea that just having black skin automatically means you're always angry, automatically means you're always violent, all of these other assumptions that society has created as a construct.
Yeah.
And then how that persists today and how that looks like, how that manifests in the current culture. But it's the same undercurrent, it's the same structural society structure that kind of all of it.
At the end of the day, and you and I know that's your personal experience, a black woman who puts her foot down is dangerous and will be punished, right? So that's just some things that I would discuss in 4-week book club of Color Purple. And like I said, there are 85 books in here, and I don't know what order I'm going to approach them in, but start with one from each section. I think this is a valuable study with so many black homeschoolers online asking for African American literature and African American history. I think the best way to approach it is to look at the literature and then explore the historical context. Okay, that's it for this video. Till next time.